Lake Bluff Finance Committee meeting on Monday, October 26, 2020. And the first item on the agenda is an oral declaration that due to the COVID-19 emergency, this meeting will be held primarily virtually. As required by law, at least one representative from the village will be present at Village Hall, and the virtual meeting will be simulcast for members of the public who do not wish to view the virtual meeting from another location. The boardroom can accommodate 13 people, including members of the public body and village staff, while maintaining the 6 feet of social distance between individuals required by Executive Order 2020-43. Accordingly, the opportunity to view the virtual meeting at Village Hall is available on a first-come, first-served basis. Members of the public may view and participate in the meeting via online at lakebluff.org/virtual meeting, or may dial in at 312-626-6799. Enter meeting ID 818-9289-8136. Press pound when prompted for participant ID. Additional instructions are available in the agenda packet immediately following the agenda. Also, the meeting will be live streamed at lakebluff.org/channel 19, broadcast live on Comcast Channel 19, and once available, a recording of the meeting will be posted on the village website and periodically rebroadcast on Channel 19. May we have now a call to order with a roll call?
Sure, I'll handle that. Member Meyer?
Present.
Member Toll?
Here.
And Sherrington?
Here. Okay. The next order of business is the approval of the minutes of the October 7th, 2020 Finance Committee meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
I think I had a couple of minor updates that I provided to staff. Nothing that changed content or anything important. Were there any other comments, changes, adjustments?
No, ma'am.
No.
Okay. All right. All in favor? May we have a roll call, please, Drew?
Member Meyer?
I'm on mute, I think.
Can't hear you, Drew.
I think you're on mute.
Member Meyer?
Actually, it might be pleasant.
Still can't hear you.
I don't think Drew is talking.
Yeah, he's not talking.
Well, he was earlier.
Yeah, I thought I lip read Member Meyer or something, but I couldn't hear him.
I can do the roll call vote while we're
Had it.
fixing that.
Sounds
It's working and now it's not.
Okay, Drew? Sorry.
Can you hear me now, folks?
Yep.
Yes.
That was
Sure.
weird. It was working and then it wasn't.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm sorry, did I miss that roll call?
Yes, we were approving the October 7th minutes.
I had the motion by Bill and the seconded by Aaron, and then the roll call, all ayes.
Well, I don't think you actually called it with anybody answering because we couldn't hear.
Oh, okay. Then I'll do that if that's all right with you.
Please.
Member Meyer?
Aye.
Member Toll?
Aye.
And Sherrington?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. So next we have allotted 15 minutes at this time for any individual who would like the opportunity to address the Finance Committee on any matter not listed on the agenda. Drew or Glenn, do we have anybody queued up?
We have no one present at Village Hall. And if anybody is interested in speaking now on items that are not on the agenda, please raise your hand. Doesn't appear to have anybody here to participate on anything that's not on the agenda.
All right, great. On to the order of business. The first item is our continued discussion regarding the 2020 property tax levy estimates and the police pension actuarial recommendation. So at our last meeting, we entered into a robust discussion of all of the elements that go into the calculation of PTEL and the levy. And Bettina, I think I'm just going to hand it over to you to kind of do a bit of a recap, if you will, for the calculation itself. And in your memo, I think you did an excellent job of kind of highlighting, once again, under each scenario, um, what the levy is allocated to. And so the portion after the pension is pulled out, that is the big variable because that pension doesn't change. So I was hoping you might be able to kind of just walk us through some of the attachments to your memo and just kind of refresh us on where we were.
Sure. Let me share screen.
Thank you.
So, Glenn, can you enable screen sharing for me?
You got it.
Thank you. So the first thing that was added with regards to the levy calculations was the chart that's actually in the memo itself. It's on the screen, the first chart in the layer here that shows the estimated portion of the tax bill based on the medium home assessed value of $626,300, which is the realistic median value that was discussed at the last meeting. So it takes you through the existing levy, the amount of the portion of the tax bill that is Lake Bluff, what the amount would be with CPI, what the amount would be excluding CPI, and then the extension amount if we held the same requested amount as we had in 2019. Each scenario is a little different and change. With CPI is $47.70 more per average household based on the median. Without CPI, it would be about $12.49, and with the extension on hold, it would be about $6.32. And that change still being because the village EAV number is still part of the factor. That number has changed, regardless of whether we hold the extension the same or not. So that was part of what was new to the memo was included, specific to the questions that were discussed. As far as the attachments are concerned, the summary of with CPI, without CPI, and holding the extension were provided in one sheet. I summarized them all in one and left out the various detail to the calculations just to show you the numbers that summarize it and would give you what you were interested in knowing with the changes in dollar and percent to each scenario type. And I see that I'm not over all the way. I don't know, can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. And so these changes flow through from the individual amounts that I just discussed based on tax bill. The biggest change, obviously, as Sherry Hinkleman mentioned, is the change to a police pension fund, which reverses any net gains with CPI and also without and with the extension on hold. And these numbers were calculated with the assumption that the library extension would be held to just for the sake of the comparison. Since the last meeting, actually today, we did receive formal request from the library that included the extension amount with CPI. So those numbers would be added on top of any choice that was made with regards to the levy here. Sorry.
And since you brought up the library, I know I've kind of asked this question a number of times, and every time it is a little bit confusing about how the library impacts what the village does. And is this a correct statement to say that the amount that we levy, whether it be holding exactly as we did before, not having CPI or adding CPI, our levy is completely independent from whatever the library decides to do. So if they don't hold like we are and they take CPI, it doesn't negatively affect the dollars that are available to us. Is that correct?
So the manner that we would calculate it, that was also, I think, discussed at the last meeting, was library's portion would be added on, layered onto whatever choice that we made. So that if we chose to hold the extension, that the net dollars they'd receive would not come from our amount, reducing it even further, that their percentage of increase would be added on. So there'd still be a change even if we held the extension the way it was. It would still be, you know, plus about $26,000.
Right.
To give the library their additional amount.
Right. So that's an important thing to realize, because the village acts as we sort of act as the conduit for collecting their taxes. So even if we hold the line, it's going to go up by whatever the library has said that they were going to go up.
Right. That's correct.
Right.
Just to let you all know, I spoke yesterday with Kathy Meyerhoff, who is president of the library board, and expressed to her that we're trying to hold steady here, and would they consider doing that? And she told me that they felt they had numerous expenses and all, and I asked her to elaborate that, as they have been closed, certainly for part of the time, and have had some reduced services. And she explained to me, in their opinion, they had an extensive herb service thing. They also, for all the books and things, and she threw out a number of 40,000 books in and out, they had to quarantine the books for X amount of time once they came back into the library. That took up time, and she was talking about that. So, needless to say, I didn't get anywhere, which I didn't think I would. But I certainly expressed that we're trying to be sensitive to the community at this point, and so that we were questioning really the expenses that they had. Also brought up the fact that the increasing minimum wage is impacting their bottom line. Okay. Just thought I would report out. I tried.
Well, thank you,
refresh my memory here on, and I frankly did not have time to go down and pull out my tax records from last year. The tax bill that we got from the county, does it separate the library from the village?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Madam Chair Anchorman, the executive director for the library, Eric Bailey, has raised his hand. If you would like to allow him to speak at this time, your option, of course.
That would be great.
Okay.
Please.
Go ahead, Eric. Eric? Eric Bailey, you can speak if your computer will allow you to do so.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I had a technical failure there. Okay, so I had passed along the letter request from the library board to Drew, and I'm hoping that he made that available to everybody. Kathy O reached out to Kathy M. We're always very grateful for contact with the village and the opportunity to touch base and collaborate and discuss on everything that both entities are doing. We did very much take into consideration in the discussion on October 20th the village's desire to hold the levy this year. The items that really came up for the library board just to add in a few things in addition to what Kathy had reported. The biggest one was probably the General Reserve Fund. A couple years back, the big roof replacement project had significantly depleted the library's reserve funds. As a result, the library for that year did, after much deliberation, go over the PTEL request limit for that 1 year specifically to prime our ability to rebuild that reserve ahead of our next anticipated major capital project. And that's gotten off to a good start, but as looking through the math and discussing with the library board, that would really be challenged to stick to that if we were, if we held the levy this year, we might well be in a position then where we had to go over PTEL in a future year, and the usefulness of going up and down like that would be, I think, a bit debatable. Some of the other issues, Kathy mentioned that we've got the ongoing challenges where we are boosting up our salaries. Our starting salaries for library assistants were $11 last year, and $14 for library associates, which are a good chunk of our staff. Neither of those, and a good portion of our staff, were over the $15, so we're in multi-year process of getting those boosted up so we stay compliant. We have worked really hard to keep expenses down this year. That was helped by some lower personnel expenses at the start of the year, but a lot of that breathing room that we were able to pick up in terms of the budget there was offset by the fact that we are bringing in less revenue by being closed. We've worked hard to diversify our revenue sources over the past few years, though we're still very dependent, 95% dependent on the property tax levy. But last year, close to $50,000 of our revenue, just under $48,000, came from non-property tax sources. But those were sources primarily like passport revenue. We were going to be rolling out a program issuing license renewals so that folks wouldn't have to go to the DMV for those, as well as fines and fees and other photocopier charges, et cetera. And some of these are just completely off the board thus far this year. And some of them are just much, much lower. Right now, we're only forecast, compared to last year, to get about $17,500 in that of that revenue. So that's a fairly significant shortfall in terms of the revenue, and that's really taken up a lot of the breathing space that we have netted by budgeting very conservatively. The library has continued to be open even when our physical space is closed, and staff have worked very, very hard, really reinventing library service and what we do on the fly, taking all of our programs digital, which have been very well attended, taking a lot of our services digital, finding ways to get materials to patrons in a safe and efficient way when it hasn't always been safe to have our doors open and have folks in. So those are some of the big points discussed there and some things that I'd add. I would hand things over here and just let everybody know that the library board very much appreciates the feeling with the village board and everything that you're doing and trying to do here, and is very much first and foremost trying to do what they feel is the most appropriate thing for the library, which is the organization that they've been elected for. So I'm here if anybody has any questions. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Eric. Do we have anybody who would like to ask any more questions of the library?
I just had a quick question, Barbara. Eric, you said something about your next anticipated capital project.
Mm-hmm.
Does the board have any more specific information on that? What do you guys see coming down the pipeline in the future?
Well, our next major capital project, and major being something in excess of $100,000, would be the replacement of the HVAC system. That was last done in 2005, 2006, and 25, 30 years is really expected life span for those. So we're really looking out as far as that expense, planning out 10, 12 years in the future, being ready for that. So the catch, unfortunately, is that the last time that happened, I believe the price tag ended up in the neighborhood of $350,000. We don't have a great setup for the HVAC system. If you've ever had a chance to take a look, the building was basically built around it, so it's an expensive proposition. So we want to be ready for that when it happens. Right now we've got about 300, trying to remember off the top of my head, see if I've got the audit up here. About 335, does that sound right, Bettina?
I think you're muted, Bettina.
Yeah, sorry, it does.
Okay. So we're getting there. The catch is that we want to have not just enough to handle that expense when it comes up, and recognizing that we need to get there with adding 20 to 25,000 to that general reserve over the next 10 years. But we also want to be able to have an appropriate reserve after that project happens. In case something unexpectedly fails, we don't have to scramble. We were in a position, unfortunately, in 2006 where we had to scramble, and very much never want to have that again. It doesn't represent great management when you get failure and then things fall apart in terms of being able to financially do things.
So Eric, from what your comments are, do I understand that these additional funds would go to rebuilding an operating reserve as well as a capital replacement fund?
Yes. Continuing to rebuild that reserve and a capital replacement fund are one of the big items that we're looking at as far as a factor weighing in on what we're doing in terms of budget and levy.
And the 330 that you talked about, how is that allocated between capital replacement and operating reserves?
Right now, because it's the only reserve we have, it's in a general reserve so that it's broadly available if it did need to be available for an expense. We would be looking to, in the next year or two here, get that capital fund set up so that we can increase the transparency with our reserve funds as far as the designations.
Yeah, I would definitely encourage you to do that, because from a budgeting standpoint, it's much more transparent to be able to share with you, with your board, with your donors, with the public, that you're actively setting aside funds for, big ticket items like whether, you did the roof, major items like roof and HVAC and other things that might crop up. The library was essentially closed from mid-March until the time that, with direct customer interface, shall we say, or even indirect customer interface. What you reopened through the pickup program in what was that, in June, July? When did we start picking up in bags?
June.
So in between mid-March and June, the public interaction was largely through e-programs. Is that correct?
That is correct. And staff put a lot of time and energy into that. That included reformatting our summer reading program so that could happen online. We acquired some additional software to make that happen. It included some additional software and changing around the way that the event worked for trivias so that those could continue. And in a lot of other events, similar twists and tweaks and change, and working with technology to keep things as much as possible ongoing. Additionally, there in May, we started gearing up in a big way for that reopening that we could see would be coming in June, and making certain that that was going to be something we did efficiently as well as safely for the community. So staff have been working and available and making as much service and as much of our collections available as possible during all this, even when, unfortunately, for a lot longer, I think, than any of us had imagined or had wanted by any stretch, the building was closed.
Eric, I guess I just had one other question regarding the COVID costs. Do you all have any opportunity for those to be reimbursed?
We do. We do have an opportunity for a lot of them to be reimbursed. We filed for that through the village. And Bettina, that's actually something I need to catch up with you on to see if we've got any progress. Not all of the requests, not all of the expenses are things that are necessarily things that we can file for. Certainly the staff time and labor isn't one of those items. It's hard to gauge in terms of the use of the resources that we already have, use of those or filing for those. The things like the PPE and the barriers for the service points that we have at the library, those are all definitely fileable, and we have filed for those. I believe it was about 8,900 that the library had filed for as part of what I'm guessing will probably end up being the village's first request for reimbursement. So very grateful to both Drew and Bettina for the opportunity to work with the village on that.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, Eric. And if there are no other questions, I wanted to get back to the village portion of the levy. Is that okay? Does anybody else have any more questions? Okay. Thank you, Eric, again. I appreciate your input.
Thank you all, and stay well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to redirect us to just the comparison analysis that Bettina had put together, looking at the levy excluding the police pension, which, as we know, increased from one year to the next over $100,000. That does leave the village, when you look at the three scenarios, if we do take CPI, it looks like the village portion of the budget will be decreasing by just over $11,000. So our levy without the police pension last year was $2,717,000, and with CPI, if we chose to take it, the village portion would still be decreasing by $11,186. So, yeah.
Can I stop you for a second? That might actually make a change in the conversation, but when I look at my tax bill that I pulled, we actually have three line items. There's the Village of Lake Bluff, Village of Lake Bluff Library, and Village of Lake Bluff Pension. And for each of these items, this is the rate and the current amount and the change from the prior year. So when you look at the tax bill, actually pension and Lake Bluff, the Village of Lake Bluff are actually two different line items.
That's why, but they are pooled together in
Correct.
terms of the PTAL limit.
Correct. But from a reporting standpoint, they're actually separated.
Mm-hmm. So what we're trying to do is isolate the portion that we have control over.
Correct.
So the police pension levy, the number is according to what the actuaries say that we're going to contribute. And I'm looking at this comparison analysis from year to year. So the levy without the police pension available for the village is $2,717,000. If we chose to take the maximum levy with CPI, the village would only have available $2,705,000. And so the point of that is to say that even if we took the maximum with CPI, the village would have less available funds to do that same work that we did in the previous year. And if you look at the analysis with no CPI, it would go down to $2,625,000, which is a decrease in the village budget of $91,000 approximately. And then if we do that extension hold, which we talked about at our last meeting, the village would decrease the available budget by $105,000. And so that's what we're trying to look at is, you know, what are we comfortable doing moving forward? And I think we kind of left with the ability to kind of think about it for a little while. I didn't know if after having, you know, thought about it and kind of looked at the numbers again, did anyone have further contributions or questions to ask regarding, you know, the direction we might take?
I think that analysis that you just mentioned, Barbara, is very important in showing that even if we were to take CPI, the village's budget would essentially remain the same. In fact, it would go down a little bit based on the increase in the police pension. And you know, I think we could make the case that we're holding our line, even if we do take CPI, because our operating budget, our capital budget, we're not trying to add anything to our budget. Yes, your tax bill will go up, but we're not trying to add any programs in this difficult time. So, you know, I've been sticking to the point where we need to try to stay at or below what we've done in the past in these challenging and kind of unknown times. And I think that analysis really it really demonstrates that even if we take CPI, that's exactly what we're doing.
Anyone else?
Barbara, I'm really, and appreciate all the analysis, and thanks to everybody who's contributed to it. I'm really in the same place, which is this is not the time to be increasing the tax burdens on our citizens to the extent that we control what is, of course, a relatively small part, just about 10%, as I understand, of the tax bill. So, you know, what I'm in favor of is the column that is captioned the extension hold. That still results in a small increase, as I understand, the number of dollars comes out of the bill. But it's a demonstration to citizens that we're going to be tightening our belts, we're responsible in these tough times, and that we're going to hold the line.
Any other board members want to contribute?
You know, I guess I'd just like to say, like, I pulled my tax bill earlier today too, just to take a look at it and see how everything was broken down. And then I also went in and I looked at what District 65 and 115, what they generally do each year, and taking into account the library and also the Park District. I think all those other taxing bodies are planning to take CPI, and I appreciate the dialogue we're having here, that we're really discussing whether or not we need to take CPI based on the economic climate, based on what people are going through, and based on what's happening with COVID. I feel like we could try to be more efficient next year. We could really work within any of these. Whether we do extension hold, no CPI, or CPI, I think we could rise to the occasion and make our budget work. it's just a question of how comfortable the board is with these dollar amounts. You know, either way, we're going to have to adjust our budget a little bit, and I myself would like to see that text if the dollars are going up. If we're going to have to charge a little bit more for taxes, if the dollars are going to go up, I would like to see it be a lower amount rather than a higher amount.
Regis?
Yes, so I spent quite some time today reading the two documents, the packet for this meeting and the next village board regarding the financial portion. And so the basic point is I need to get my figures straight. The police pension is going to go from 744 to 849. That means that we need to raise $105,000 basically. If we look at how we raise our tax bill, what will happen to us is we'll go from about 6,000 to about 42,000 additional cash. So we will be down for about 600,000. That will be done by basically saving money somewhere else. At the end of the day, we'll be down about 200,000 that will be covered by the CARE Act. So at the end of the day for this year, that will be a wash. We will have a stable budget. I think we're lucky. Now, next year we might not be that lucky, but I think this year by tightening our belt, as Joey said, we are fine. But next year might be a different story.
Could you just elaborate on that? You netted out a couple of big numbers. One of them was 600,000, and I didn't understand where that came from.
You know what? I took a lot of notes, and I was trying to summarize that pretty fast. The first number I named was our police pension went from...
Right, from 744 to 849. That's a difference of 105.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
The portion of the tax bill that would go this is actually in Bettina's document for tonight. We have a few choices that are actually in front of us. We either can go from, we can add either 613, and the best case is 613, the worst case is plus 42.
That's the number that I don't know what that is. What is that?
It is, I think, the yellow spreadsheet, the first spreadsheet Bettina showed. That spreadsheet.
So the 600,000, are you talking about the median home market value?
We're talking about the village portion of tax bill. You see the line 15?
Yes.
The worst case is plus 6. The worst case is plus 47. So from an increased standpoint, this is where we stand. Okay.
Understood. As on an average household.
Exactly. And then the last figure I named was, if you look in the village packet, it says, to address the financial uncertainty of the COVID-19 pandemic, the village adopted a budget that incorporated numerous reduction in revenue and expenditures. Sales and income tax expectations were reduced by $749,000. A freeze of $180,000 in general fund transfer to the vehicle replacement was enacted. A reverse of the $410,000 inter-fund transfer was approved.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one is expenses were reduced in the general fund by $639,600 for operational and capital improvements. So if you sum all that, we would actually be short by $200,000, and those $200,000 would actually be covered by the CARE Act county, I believe this is county budget for Lake Bluff. So at the end of the day, we end up with a zero sum.
Okay, so what you're doing is you're just taking a look at the financial report and the summary that Bettina had put together for how we took the budget for the next year and did some looking ahead and decided to change some of our reserves around.
Exactly.
And, anticipating that we would have a shortfall in, sales tax and then everything else had to do with changing the reserves around, and there were some operational expenses that were reduced, some also related to capital. So
So from a global standpoint, we're balancing our budget. This is the basic point.
well, right. What we did at the beginning of the year was we tried to say, let's look ahead and see what we think we need to do so that we would be in a good position. But those transfers that didn't happen means that those fund balances are still affected by that lack of transfer. So
That is correct.
right. So in some ways you'd like to say, oh, we're fine, we did it, but there are some lasting impacts to that.
Correct.
And our best guesses for what would happen in terms of expenses and revenues, we still don't know that full impact.
So to Joyce's point, Barbara, what will happen next year? If we have a lasting impact, as you say, what will be our stance for next year from a financial aspect in Lake Bluff?
I'm not saying that I know how we would handle it next year.
Okay.
I'm not saying that I know that. What I'm saying is that we have an opportunity to look at the levy right now and say, given these things that we do know, such as, an increase in contributions for police levy, that leaves less dollars that were available for the village to do its function. And overall, we have this matrix to look at of, we can do it exactly as we did last year. That's the extension hold. We can not add CPI, which is very close to that same number, and also we could consider taking CPI. And even in that case, when that's the largest increase that we could take with PTAL. Even in that case, the village is still needing to tighten their belts a little bit because of all those other things that we cannot control. So
I'm still worried about your statement about being a lasting impact on our budget for next year. So I think we can. This will be okay for this year. But my real question is, what will happen next year? And I don't need an answer to that today. But.
Okay. Well, I mean, Bettina, maybe you could share a little bit in terms of the calculations of PTAL and the ramifications of keeping the levy where it was last year versus taking CPI. What is that lasting ramification just in terms of next year's levy?
So without tying an actual cash value to that calculation, the biggest impact would be when you look at the sheets and how the calculations are done. The prior year's extension number is factored by the rate of CPI to come up with the new number that drives the PTAL rate. And when we retain the same number, we have lost the opportunity for that one-time increase.